Let us take a very quick look at the current board just to see where our pieces are standing right now. At this very moment, Brook Lynn Quartermain has orchestrated a massive, dangerous lie, framing Willow Kane for the hit-and-run accident that left Jordan and Curtis Ashford severely injured. Brook Lynn was the one behind the wheel, driving under the influence, and she fled the scene in a panic. To cover her tracks, she enlisted the help of Lucy Coe and Brick to manipulate GPS data and point the police directly at Willow. Meanwhile, Harrison Chase, the ultimate Boy Scout cop and Brook Lynn's devoted husband, is blindly defending Willow, determined to clear her name, completely unaware that his own wife is the true culprit. Lucy Coe is holding all the cards, waiting for Brook Lynn to hand over control of deception as payment for her silence. That is exactly where we are standing today. But that is merely the starting line for the absolute nightmare that is about to unfold. Let us explore the first future, and this one is a straight shot into absolute tragedy. There is a very strong chance that this storyline is heading toward a massive corporate and personal betrayal that will leave casualties in its wake. What happens when Lucy Coe inevitably fails to gain control of deception? We know Lucy. When she feels used, manipulated, and backed into a corner, she lashes out with devastating precision. If that happens, the story could be heading toward Lucy completely turning on Brook Lynn. Imagine the scene. A public, humiliating revelation where Lucy drops the ultimate bombshell, exposing Brook Lynn as the drunk driver who hit Jordan and Curtis and then maliciously framed an innocent mother. Who benefits here? Lucy gets her petty, scorched earth revenge, and Willow is completely exonerated. But who is in danger? Everyone in Brook Lynn's immediate orbit. The bigger consequence may be exactly how Harrison Chase reacts to this horrifying truth. Looking ahead, if Chase discovers that the woman he loves, the woman he married and promised to protect, is capable of such profound cruelty and criminal behavior, his entire worldview will shatter into a million pieces. In this first scenario, Chase does not just leave Brook Lynn. He actively teams up with Willow to ensure his wife faces the full, unforgiving extent of the law. This could lead to Brook Lynn experiencing a complete catastrophic psychological break. Facing charges for a hit and run, fleeing the scene, and masterminding a criminal conspiracy to frame Willow, Brook Lynn will realize she has no way out. In a state of absolute, out-of-control desperation, she confronts Chase. The argument escalates into a physical, violent tragedy. In a blind, unadulterated rage, Brook Lynn grabs a weapon of opportunity and plunges it directly into Chase's abdomen. The visual of Chase collapsing, bleeding out on the floor while looking up at the wife who just tried to kill him, would be one of the most shocking moments in recent television history. And she does not stop there. Driven by pure madness, she turns her weapon on Willow, only to be tackled by a surprise savior at the very last second. Chase is rushed to the hospital, fighting for his life, while Brook Lynn is dragged away in handcuffs, facing decades in a maximum security prison. But let us pivot and look at a second future, one that is completely different and changes the entire board in ways we are not expecting. What if the person who stops Brook Lynn from murdering Willow is not just a random bystander or a fellow police officer, but Tracy Quartermain herself? We all know Tracy has been fiercely defending Brook Lynn, warning Chase that he will answer to her if he ever dares to break her granddaughter's heart. But what if this moment becomes the ultimate, devastating test of Tracy's loyalty? If that happens, imagine Tracy walking into the mansion, expecting to scold Willow, only to find Brook Lynn covered in Chase's blood, wildly attempting to finish Willow off. There is a massive chance that Tracy is the one who has to physically disarm her own granddaughter. This would not just be a minor variation of the story. It would shift the entire Quartermain family dynamic forever. Tracy, the ultimate protector of the family name, would be forced to make the most agonizing decision of her long life: help Brook Lynn cover up the attempted murder of a police officer, or call the cops and send her own flesh and blood to prison. The future consequences of this path are staggering. Tracy choosing the law over her family would destroy her internally, leaving her a hollow shell of the formidable matriarch we know. Furthermore, if Chase survives this horrific ordeal, the legal war between the Quartermains and the PCPD would be unprecedented. Brook Lynn would not just be a desperate woman who snapped, She would become the ultimate pariah of Port Charles, disowned by the very grandmother who promised to protect her at all costs. The story could be heading toward a complete restructuring of the Quartermaine Empire, with Michael and Willow suddenly finding themselves holding all the power and influence, while Brook Lynn rots in a dark, lonely cell, stripped of her name and her wealth. Now, let us dive into the third future. This is the most unexpected path, the wild card scenario that very few people are considering right now, but it is incredibly fascinating and rich with soapy drama. What if the physical altercation that leaves Chase fighting for his life is not a direct, intentional attack by Brook Lynn, but rather a chaotic, multi-person struggle orchestrated by Lucy Coe's continued, reckless meddling? Hear me out on this one. What if Lucy, not satisfied with just exposing Brook Lynn to the police, decides to confront her alongside Chase and Willow in a highly volatile environment? In this scenario, the confrontation becomes a massive four-way screaming match. Brook Lynn, pushed to the absolute brink of insanity by the betrayal, tries to physically destroy the fabricated evidence or attack Lucy, and Chase steps in the middle to protect Willow and de-escalate the situation. In the ensuing chaos, the stabbing is accidental but devastatingly lethal. Brook Lynn did not mean to strike Chase, but in her fractured, panicked state of mind, she fully embraces the guilt, believing she is a monster who destroys everything she touches. But here is the massive, landscape-altering twist. What if, while Brook Lynn is sitting in a maximum security prison awaiting trial for attempted murder, and Chase is lying in a medically induced coma attached to life support, Brook Lynn discovers she is pregnant with Chase's child? The long-term fallout of this would be absolutely wild and emotionally devastating. You would have a highly publicized criminal trial, a critically injured hero cop fighting to wake up, and a villainous broken wife carrying his legacy behind bars. It does not need to be the most likely scenario, but guys, you have to admit it is gripping enough to keep us glued to our screens for the next 2 years, watching to see if this child will be born in a prison infirmary or if Chase will wake up in time to save his family. So, which path makes the most sense? If you ask me, the trajectory that feels the most authentic to these characters is the first one, where Lucy's betrayal triggers a genuine, violent, psychotic break for Brook Lynn. I keep coming back to the idea that Brook Lynn has been playing with fire for far too long. She has always believed she could scheme her way out of any consequence, relying on her family's endless money and her own manipulative charm to avoid accountability. But a hit and run? Framing an innocent mother? That is a permanent line you cannot uncross. The path that feels most likely is the one where Chase's ultimate betrayal, siding with Willow, and the law over his own wife is the exact pinpoint trigger that shatters Brook Lynn's sanity once and for all. Chase is the moral compass of Port Charles. He represents everything good, righteous, and pure in a town filled with mobsters and criminals. For Brook Lynn to realize that she is permanently corrupted and lost, that goodness is enough to drive anyone completely mad. If you ask me, seeing Brook Lynn completely lose control, lunging at Chase in a moment of pure, unadulterated despair, perfectly pays off months of escalating tension and lies. It is dark, it is tragic, and it is exactly the kind of high-stakes, breathless drama that we have been waiting for. We need to see the mighty fall, and Brook Lynn Quartermaine hitting absolute rock bottom with her husband's blood on her hands is the poetic, devastating climax this story so desperately deserves. But we cannot just stop there. If that happens, what comes next? What is the next shockwave to hit Port Charles after the dust settles? If Brook Lynn is arrested and charged with the attempted murder of a police officer, the hit and run of Jordan and Curtis, and the malicious framing of Willow, the ripple effects will be utterly catastrophic for years to come. Let us talk about what happens after the sirens fade and the blood is cleaned off the Quartermaine floor. If this scenario plays out, the bigger consequence may be the profound, unbreakable trauma bond that forms between Chase and Willow. Looking ahead, with Chase recovering from a near-fatal stab wound and Willow recovering from the psychological terror of nearly being framed and murdered, these two are going to lean on each other like never before. Could this lead to a reignited, passionate romance between the heroic cop and the resilient nurse? Absolutely. Furthermore, what happens to Lucy Coe? Tracy Quartermain is not going to let Lucy walk away unscathed, regardless of what Brook Lynn did. Even if Brook Lynn is guilty of every single charge, Tracy will blame Lucy for pushing her granddaughter over the edge into madness. We could be looking at a lethal, scorched earth corporate war where Tracy systematically destroys deception, bankrupts Lucy, and leaves her with absolutely nothing. The story could be heading toward a Port Charles where the Quartermain family is forever stained by violence, Chase is forever scarred by the woman he loved, and the future remains a dark, unpredictable maze of revenge, survival, and forbidden romance. Guys, the board is firmly set. The pieces are moving at lightning speed, and the destruction that is coming will change this town forever.
Goodbye. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the GH Spoilers Daily channel.